course, knowing anything about the place, why, it's all hearsay, and I don't know too much about that. Only I know that there was so much salt there that saleratus, that it was difficult to raise much of a crop, but it was later, I think Uncle Bill put a draining system in down there, tile. So they took the salt down, became very productive. But when Father was there, that salt, it was hard to make a living on that. That's the reason he came to Idaho.
Now, west of where your father was, there's a lot of fruit trees that started in the 1880s. And south, they had Miller's apple orchard. He shipped apples as far as Chicago. And Adams and Kiesel owned a lot of fruit trees there, pears, peaches, apples, along near the shoreline. And north, Gilbert, the ward became the first ward in 1895. That's about the year that you left, huh?
Yeah, Father came up here in the spring of '95. Of course, I think he came up here in the fall of '94, but Mother and the family came up in '95.
Had you heard that William Criddle also come up and homesteaded some here?
Yes, he came up. I'd heard that he came up, but then in talking with Viola, see, he went on his mission and someone jumped his right. And in fact, the country here was still in the reservation when they came here. They had more or less just a squatter's right. Now, I have a copy of my father's deed on the property. He came up and settled up here. He bought a squatter's right. There was a fellow on it. He bought him out. And he settled on the place. And I have a copy of the where he proved up on the homestead. And that isn't dated till 1904. Theodore Roosevelt signed the papers. But at first, when they first came, I think it was just on the Indian reservation, really. I don't know just where it was that Uncle Bill was settled, but then I knew he came up here and filed on it, or I guess it was just a temporary thing until someone else came in and got it while he was on his mission, so I've been told.
Okay, would you tell us who your father and mother are, their names, and some of the children, the earlier, at least the children, and when
well, let me go. I got a card in here. You know the history of John Criddle, my father's father, coming over here from England, and I arrived in Salt Lake. The first winter he was here, he lived with Jedediah M. Grant. And the following spring, he went to Brigham Young and asked him what he recommended, any recommendation for what he should do. And he told him, yes, there was a widow up in Kaysville that needed help, and for him to go up and help that woman up there. And so Samuel Driggs, he'd passed away some time before, and so grandfather went up there, and in a matter of time they were married. She had 5 or 6 children when she married grandfather. And let's see, there was, I don't know, 2 or 3 girls. There was 2 I know of, but I don't know if there's any more than 2 girls, were the first ones born to John Criddle and Elizabeth Ann Taylor Driggs. And father was I think it was the 3rd child, and he was the oldest of the 3 boys, John, William, and James. And my father was born on the 16th of April, 1860 in Kaysville. And I guess you all know where Uncle Jim used to live, so that's where he lived. I've been there, and I've seen the old house where they lived in. And then Uncle Jim built a brick home there, and it still stands there. I have a son living in Kaysville, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's on some of the original land. He's just a block south of where Uncle Jim's old home is. Of course, it's built up there now, but I have a son living there. And it might be interesting too, you know, my father came up here, and there was a hides that were from Kaysville.
This red button's not on, is it?
That came up here too, but about the same time. And George T. Hyde, well, he was made a bishop out in the Cambridge ward out here, about 2.5 miles north, in 98. The ward was the first ward was organized here, I think, in the early 90s in Cambridge. Then William A. Hyde became the president in 95, and Father moved up that spring, and that fall he went into the bishopric with W.A. Hyde. And of course Hydes originated in Kaysville, and in 1898, William A. Hyde was taken into the stake presidency of the Oneida stake. That was included a large area here, and his brother George T. Hyde became the bishop. And my father went into bishopric in 95. In 98, he became a counselor to George T. Hyde. And the Downey Ward wasn't organized until 1907. And George T. Hyde lived in the Downey Ward. He became the bishop then of the Downey Ward, and my dad was his first counselor. And he remained as the counselor until he passed away in 1913. So from the time he moved up here, he was a counselor of the bishopric. Of course, I don't have a lot of memories of my dad. I can't recall my father talking to me or anything of the kind like that. But I do remember the example that he set. I don't believe there was ever a meeting that he was supposed to attend that he wasn't there. He was very faithful. I have been told that there was one time he rode a horse clear to Preston to attend the conference. But now as far as down there, Syracuse is concerned, it's all hearsay with me. In 1833, February the 15th, Father married Mother in the endowment house. And I believe you said that's the year that...
1883.
1883, that's the year that he acquired that piece of property out there in West Syracuse. Now, as far as Mother is concerned, in those days they were asking the saints to go certain places and settle, out from Salt Lake. And grandfather and grandmother were asked to go down and settle in that St. George country. And right after their marriage, shortly after, and they moved down in Tokerville, the covered wagon, and my mother was born in a covered wagon in Tokerville. They just arrived down there. And she grew up in out in there, southern Utah. And then I think she's about 12 years old. After 12 years down there, they moved back up into Kaysville, and Father met her and later married her. Now, you have any other question?
I had a question, if I might ask. What do you remember any early visits as a boy to the Syracuse area?
Well, I remember going down there when I think I was about a 7-year-old. They was living down on the bottom at that time, and I remember being there, and of course that well amused me because we didn't have flowing water that you could set on fire in this country. And as I remember, it didn't taste the best, but I remember that and playing down there with, I don't know the occasion, but I know Father went down and drove down with a wagon, and but Mother and my younger sister and we went down on the train and met them. Of course, we was out to Uncle George Bennett's, and we was up to Uncle Will's. I don't recall whether we ever went up to Uncle Jim's or not. I kind of doubt that we did, but I do remember being there, and they were digging beets at the time, and that's the first time I'd ever see anyone raising beets. We don't raise beets. I didn't raise beets up here at that time. Well, there had been some raised since, but then they've stopped raising them here beets here now.
That would have been about 1907 then.
I think that was about 1907, right in there. It's about the time I started to school.
What do you remember of the area besides playing? What sticks in your mind as highlights or physical conditions?
Well, I don't have much recollection of that. There's one thing that I was impressed that it was so level down there. The country was level. And here up in this country, well, it's more or less rolling. Of course, the homestead up here where Father is quite level. But I don't recall too much about that. Now, Father and Mother, their first child was, they were married on February the 15th, and on December the 30th, that same year in '83, their first child was born, Nora Zelia, but she was hurt and never had childbirth, and she never did develop like she should have done, and I know 2 or 3 years later she passed away. I might mention this.
Where was she buried? Do you know where she was buried?
She's buried in Kaysville. Yes. Yes, you take it, Melvin, my son that lives down there in Kaysville, he's been there and found her grave. I've never been to it, but then he's found her grave down there. So it's in Kaysville. And let's see, she died on March the 18th, 1887. And then there was Lonetta, Eva, Lorne, John, and Sadie, all born down there in Kaysville. They moved up here in '95, and they've all passed away. Of course, there was Irvin and Orissa, Lily Orissa, and myself, and the younger sister, Vinnie. They've all passed away, but I'm a lone leaf on the tree.
You're the last remaining one.
The last remaining one.
Do you have any idea where our grandfather would have homesteaded, or what parcel of land, what area he may have selected here in the Downey area?
I don't know that.
Would there be any records that would show that?
I would rather doubt it on account of it being in the reservation at that time. So, and it was more or less just a squatter's right. And so I doubt that there would be any record of it.
What was the name of the reservation?
Well, I guess it was be the Blackfoot Indian reservation.
Blackfoot Indian, okay.
I think
I wondered if it would be in their records, you see. Indian reservation records.
As you come down, that you rode the train, you down, and your father and mother come by wagon?
My father went down by wagon. We went on the. Mother went with us on the train down.
You remember the roads? Were they weren't gravelled and asphalted, I guess, then, were they?
No, there was no gravel or roads or anything of that kind. It was mud and dust in those days. The one thing I do remember on that trip was one of the horses that Father had on the covered wagon was kicked, and of course he had shoes on, and it spiked his other horse in the knee. And he was laid up for some time, and Father stayed down there, and they bathed that horse's leg in sagebrush tea. And he recovered from it. He drove him back home, but he had to stay on for time down there. But Mother and the rest of us came home.
You come by train, or?
We came back by train. We
You
never
brought
came.
the wagon later, I guess.
Do you recall how long it took by wagon? Do you have any feeling for that?
Well, I don't know how long it would take by wagon to going down there, but I remember as a boy, you know, around here they didn't raise a lot of fruit. And they used to go down to Brigham City in the fall of the year. They'd put springs on a covered wagon, and I remember riding down to Brigham City with my father for fruit in the fall of the year. And we would leave here in the morning, and we'd get down there on the following day to Brigham City. And from Brigham City on, I might it'll take another day, at least, from there on down to Syracuse. So you could figure on about 3 days for that trip.
You remember your father talking about the log cabin they lived in Syracuse, or the home?
No, I have no remembrance of my father telling anything about it. Of course, see, I was only 13 when Father died, and I don't recall those things. The only I remember more about the just what my brother and sisters have mentioned about it. And of course, that's very vague as far as that's knowing anything about the home. Only that it
Was it a log cabin or a home?
It was a log cabin, and it was pointed out to me when I was down there that that's where they lived. But that's all. I never was to the place.
It was on the east side of the road, you remember?
I believe it was. I'm not sure.
One room or more?
Beg pardon?
One room, cabin, or 2 or 3?
Well, I'll tell you, in those days they didn't have very much room, so I would surmise that it was a one-room cabin. The reason I say that, now, they moved up here in 95. Father came up in 94 and got out logs and built a one-room home up here. And then Mother came up in the spring of 95. Why, it wasn't quite finished. It still had a dirt floor in it. later became a granary. And there was those, let's see, there was 5 children, and mother and father, and then that fall of '95, Irvin was born, so there's 6 children, that'd be 8 of them living in that one room. So I imagine that down there it wouldn't be a very large building that they lived in, so you say a one room, was it one room? I would guess that it would be one room, because you see he wasn't there too long. He got the place in 83, and he first filed on it, and all his children were born, and then come up here in '95.
Mm-hmm.
That's 9 years he was up here.
Was the log cabin there when you visited later on? Was the log cabin still standing?
Yes, I remember going through that country in later years after that. We was in a car, and we was driving, and it was pointed out that that was the place. Of course, we didn't go there, but that was the place where they used to live. So it was still standing at that time.
Was it standing alone, or was there another home or shed and yards there by it at that time?
I think there was other buildings around there, as I remembered.
There is a log cabin about where you're talking existing now, today, that we was trying to place out whose it is. In the very vicinity that you're talking.
Does the name Charles Hanson have any recollection?
No, not with me.
There's one low log cabin there, and there's a home just to the north of it, a frame rectangular home, a small, was originally a 2-room home, about 50, 75 feet to the north of the side of the log cabin.
Well, as I remember, it was there when we were down there. Later years when we drove by and see that was the place. So I think a brother was with me at the time and recalled it.
I just wonder, I don't know of any other than the Charles Hanson homes there, Don. I'm wondering if that's might have been the original, the old granary.
That little cabin that's there might be the granary.
The granary. Grandfather's granary, you see.
Well, it really isn't big enough for that many to live in, is it?
Well, they
It's
go
not
by
very-
pretty good.
One room, well, when they,
Yeah, that granary's awfully small.
Well, look at the one down by Bill's, they had 5 or 6 living in there. Just a little room log cabin.
You have bunk beds, or you have stack of beds in those days. I don't know.
You have to tell them what Johnny said about how you had to sleep.
Oh. Well, after they'd lived in this log house for, about 2 years, I think it was, then Father built a frame house. And it was one room and there was a lean on it. And, of course, by that time, I was born in that, there. It was, I think it was about 97 when he built that. And there was Irvin, was born here. Orissa was born here, up there. I was born there. And, of course, there's about 11 of us there in that one room, you might say, with just a lean on the side. And Johnny used to tell the story, he says he always went to bed on the floor, but he always woke up standing against the wall. He said to get them kids to get them to sleep. They pick them up and stand them against the wall, the others go to bed.
that is standing out there. Would that be that one?
But you wonder how they could live
Yeah.
under those circumstances.
But they
I-
did.
I'm sure we all slept on the floor, a big part of us.
Yeah, same way.
About how big was the log cabin or the cabin that your father built here? The one-room cabin?
Well-
Initial dimensions?
I'm just making a guess. It was quite a long. I'm looking at this room here. I would guess it was maybe about 18 feet long and maybe 12 feet wide. Because I know we used to have made a granary out of it, because that's, I remembered, as a granary.
The reason I'm asking, that gives an idea of the size that the family of 6 plus others for 2 years lived in here. It could have been about the same size or a little smaller down there.
Wouldn't be any larger.
No.
Smaller.
Probably smaller.
Would any of the ancestors of, say, those that was born in Syracuse, any of their children be living that we might interview or ask if they had, their fathers or mothers had histories that might relate to the Syracuse area?
Well, you'd have to go into the third and fourth generation. You take it, Aunt Mariah, she was at Driggs, Samuel Driggs' daughter. She lived in here, up north. But she's been dead many years. Her family's all been dead, and that's in the third or fourth generation, so I don't suppose they'd know very much about it.
There isn't any children of, say, Lauren Criddle living, or John Edwin Criddle.
Yes, I have, Lauren has one son, lives in Pocatello. And Johnny has a couple of sons that live here. But then, see, Johnny wouldn't be too old when they came here until...
Unless their father had a history that he had written.
He doesn't have a history, I know that. In fact, my father never kept any history. Now, what the information we've got is things that mother has told them, and I have the record where father didn't have father's handwriting. Of course, about all it records is when they were born and where they were born, and gives the date and their marriage and death. That's all that's contained in it. Of course, that's where I copied this material off. When father came here, so I've been told, he was planning on going up to the Camas Prairie country and look at the property up there. Of course, he came up here and stopped. Mariah lived up here, his sister, and mother had a sister here, but his father was planning on going up and looking in that country. And he went as far as McCammon. Now, that's 20 miles north. He spent overnight up in McCammon, and he was felt impressed to come back and settle here. You know, we're told in the scriptures that our times were appointed, and the bounds of our habitation set. And so I guess we were supposed to be here. Now, you take it, father all of his life here was in the bishopric, and I've been in 3 different bishoprics here in the valley before I ever went into the High Council, and then the stake presidency, and then the stake president. And my son has been a bishop here and in the High Council. And so this is where I guess we're supposed to be.
You just have the one son up here?
Yes, they've all left. I have my first wife and I were married in 1923, and my first son was born in 24, and he's the only one that's around here. I sold everything that I had to him in 67. And the second boy, he lives in Kaysville. And the third boy, see, Dale was 11 years old when his mother died. Melvin was 8, and Max was 2.5 when their mother died. And we were living up on the farm. And there's, well, it was 3/4 of a mile to the closest neighbor. We had no telephone, and of course the younger boy stayed with his grandmother when I couldn't take care of him during the summertime. But she died in 1936, after 12 years. And in 1937, I married again. There was a lady that taught school here, and she was a real nice lady and very religious, just very religious, spiritual-minded teacher. I knew her. She came up there to our home. Well, I was a trustee, and she came up to our home there a number of times, and I'd also a member of the bishopric, and she was very friendly with my first wife and everybody in the neighborhood. So after my first wife passed away, she'd left here and gone back down to Preston was teaching in Preston. And I went and looked her up in Preston, and we were married in 37, a year after, 14 months after my wife died. And then she had 3 daughters and then 2 sons. And I might tell you about them. We had a patriarchal blessing, and after we were married. And in the patriarchal blessing, she was told that she had the privilege in the pre-existence of choosing her parentage and her life's companion. So I figure we must have had some kind of a relationship even in that pre-existent state. And we were married, and we had a very, very happy marriage. And in 62, she passed away. What I was going to tell you, I had a patriarchal blessing at the same time that in Bessie's blessing, this statement is made. In the absence of your husband, the responsibility will rest upon you in training the children. Well, I just took it that I was going to die and she's going to have the responsibility of raising the children, because that mentioned that, and it never came to me until she passed away. I'd been the stake president for a number of years in the High Council. The late time I was out on the farm, who'd been raising those children? Who'd been giving the training? She'd been doing it all along. And there I'd been expecting I was going to die because of what was said, but then the realization of its fulfillment, I could plainly see. And she trained them well. I have a family that I'm proud of. I had 8 children. 7 of them have filled missions. I filled a mission myself, and I went to mission field when I was 19 years old, and came back, and I went into the bishopric here in the Downey Ward when I was 23 years old. They changed the bishopric a couple of years after I came home, and I was chosen as a counselor in the bishopric. The bishop told me afterwards that he went to the state president, who was the president. Ty became the president of the state. Father was his counselor when they moved, organized the ward in Downey, and the Portneuf stake was organized in 1915, and George T. High would make the state president. And when they reorganized the Downey ward in 1923, J.F. Hardwickson, who was made the bishop, asked President Hyde if he had any recommendations. He told me this, Hardwickson himself. He says, yes, take James Criddle. And so I was made a high priest when I was 23 years old. I've been a high priest for 67 years. I wonder how many been a high priest longer than I have. I've been a high priest longer than President Benson. President Benson's got me beat from August till March, older than I am. But now the boy that lives, my third boy, 2.5 years old, he lives in Seattle. He has been on a mission, but all the rest of them have. It's the only time in the history of our state that two boys left at the same time going to mission field. My two boys went to mission field at the same time. And one of them served as a bishop for a ward here. The other had been on the High Council in Kaysville. I see they got back. But my oldest son, by my second wife, he filled a mission in England. He's a doctor. Lives in Auburn, Washington. And has a very fine practice out there. And my last boy filled his mission in New Zealand. And he graduated from BY, and they came from, let's see, Exxon?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Exxon. They sent men out there to BY and interviewed him, wanted him to come and work for them. And so, after filling his mission and getting his master's degree in BY, he started working for Exxon. And he has well, I don't call it a job, I call it a position with Exxon. And he's doing very well he lives in Houston. But the girls, now I mention this because of what I told you about my wife's patriarchal blessing in the absence of her husband. The responsibility rests upon her to train the children. My oldest daughter, she went to school in Rexburg, and she met a fellow in Rexburg, and they got married. His father had been a bishop. Well, they moved back to Colorado, working for Hewlett-Packard back there. He's been in the stake presidency, and he's now a bishop. My second daughter, she lives in Logan. The first one lives in Loveland, Colorado. Lives in Logan. And she she was teaching, she'd graduated from BY, and she started teaching school in Salt Lake. And there's a fellow returned from a mission in Salt Lake and met her, and they were married. You know, it's kind of interesting. She met a fellow when she's going to school to Salt Lake, and he wanted to marry her, and she didn't feel like taking his ring, but she finally took it, but then she kept it for a while, and she didn't feel right. She gave it back to him. Well, she met a fellow in Salt Lake that had been over in Germany filling a mission, and he was engaged to a woman, and he didn't feel right, and they split up. And so my second daughter and he got married. And they live in Logan.
What is his name?
Roylance.
Roylance?
Roylance. Rolance. Glenn Roylance. Well, they lived in Salt Lake, and he was called into the stake presidency in Salt Lake. And he labored as a counselor in the stake presidency in Salt Lake. And let's see. At first, after they were married and graduated, he went to San Diego, was teaching in the institute in San Diego. And then they came back up to Salt Lake, and he was taken into stake presidency there and was teaching in the institute in Salt Lake. And he was taken into stake presidency in Salt Lake. And then he was called to be the mission president in Hamburg, Germany. And so my wife spent 3 years with her husband over there and president of the German mission. This is my oldest son.
Right there.
Hi, hello.
Come on
I
and
thought
shake
so was
hands
the
with him.
family.
It is.
We're family.
This is my cousin, Della's daughter.
Oh, uh-huh.
And this is Von Hansen, Millie Hansen, my cousin, and that's her husband.
Oh.
And
Pleased to
and
meet
this
you.
is
Pleased to
Della's
meet you.
boy,
Oh, pleased to meet you.
My wife,
Pleased to meet you.
and that's her wife.
I won't cross through that thing. I don't want to get mixed up with it.
And he was called to be a mission president over in Hamburg, Germany. So he went over and was president of the Hamburg German mission for 3 years. And then he came back and he was called into the stake presidency down in Logan. And he served in Logan for 9 years as a counselor. And a year ago,
This spring.
This spring?
Just last spring.
last spring, he was called to be the president of the Logan Central Stake. And I don't know if you know him or not. But he teaches
I
in the
think
institute
so.
in Logan.
I was asking the question because there was an elder. We've been on a mission in England, came back in February.
This
And,
last February?
The last February, and there was an elder Roy Lance there from, I'm not sure, but I think he's from Bountiful area. I'm not positive of that. Anyway, it's probably the same family. Very fine individual.
Well, he has a son that was called to fill a after my wife and him were married. They filled their mission over there. Of course, they had children over there. And after they came back and settled in Logan, he's teaching at the institute. Their oldest son was called to go back to Germany on a mission. And then their second son was called to go to China. But he had to learn Cantonese. Anyway, he went to China. And then their oldest daughter, she's been back in Germany on a mission. And then my third daughter, she filled a mission in England. And
Well, you've had a very good family in your
well, and you take it, when she was in England, she met a fellow. They didn't do any court or anything, but after they came back, well, she met a fellow, and they were married. He filled a mission in England. She did too, and they were married. And he was released. Well, the day Glenn was made the president of the Logan Central Stake, he was released as bishop of his ward down in Orem and taken into High Council. So their men are all active spiritually, active, engaged.
Tell us a little bit about how you met your existing wife and
This one?
your lovely bride
Oh, that's a
there.
big
Yes,
story.
I'll tell you. It's quite interesting. You know, I was the president of a stake, and she was living in McCammon. Her husband was the ward clerk in the McCammon ward. And of course, I'd have having to check books and things. I became acquainted with her husband, and she was the secretary of our Stake Relief Society. And so, being in the Stake family, naturally I knew her, and I knew him. And he had a brain tumor, and he was in the hospital. And of course, the hospital right close here, and I was called over to administer to him in the hospital. And he blacked out on the 19th of November, 1956. They took him to the hospital, he died. 6 years to the day, from the time that he blacked out with his brain tumor, my wife blacked out with a brain tumor. And we took her to Salt Lake, and of course she passed away. Both of our companions passed away with a brain tumor. In the meantime, had moved to Logan, and was living in Logan, of course, in going through the temple down there. I took her through the veil a number of times, or, you know, working in the veil, the temple. I'd taken her through the veil, and of course, knowing all her and her family. By the way, when her husband died, I talked at his funeral. And so I got a telephone book, and I was down in Logan, looked up where she lived, and just naturally called on her. And she was very surprised at it. I called up the home, and she had one daughter that was living with her, going to college at the time. And I called at the home, and she wasn't home, but her daughter told me that she'd be back a little later. And so I told her, well, I'd call back later. And of course, I called back later, and she was always very careful and always pulling the blind. And I came back, and she hadn't pulled the blind that night, and there she sat all in white, sitting there reading the paper, and I stood outside and looked through the window. Of course, she couldn't see me, it being dark, and I could see everything inside. And I had the feeling then that, well, I fell in love with her right then. And it wasn't many months until we both knew what we wanted, and we were married. So she sealed to her first husband. But one thing I would mention to you, her family, I don't think, could have shown greater appreciation to their own father and grandfather than they've shown to me. Now, most of their children, of her grandchildren, never knew her grandfather. Very few of them knew him. And my family have felt the same way about all that they've shown the greatest appreciation to her. You might read, they had a reunion here a few years ago, and they honored their father. They tell them about their father. And I'm going to get something and let you read it.
Pa Criddle, Island Park, Anderson reunion, 1983. So it's her family, a tribute to him. This year at the reunion, as you already know, we honored our dear grandpa who left us years ago. But we have another grandpa, a special kind of man, and we'd like to take a minute to thank him if we can. You know, our other grandpa died when most of us were small, and many didn't have a chance of knowing him at all. That left our grandma lonely for nearly 7 years. We're sure she had her bad days and shed a lot of tears. Grandma's loneliness was ended in June of 63.
It's 83.
This said 63 on here, 83.
Well, it would be right.
Yeah.
That is
63.
63.
When Grandpa
That's
Criddle
right.
married her, they were happy as could be. They've been married 20 years. Such lovely years they've been. For he's been good to Grandma, and she's been good to him. Now let's just take a moment before we move along and talk about the other things that Grandpa Criddle's done. He was born in Downey the 1st of March, you see. The year was 1900. That makes him 83. He served a mission for the church. Missouri was the place. He filled his mission gladly with a smile on his face. He's held many church positions, though much time they'd take, included 19 years as president of the Portneuf Stake. He's lived in Downey all his life. He raised 8 children here. His work was on the farm, a work he loved so dear. Grandpa likes to watch TV, especially sports, you know, but every night at 6:30, he watches Tic-Tac-Toe. Another thing he likes to do is sit and read a book, or take a drive up to the farm just to take a look. These are just a few things that have been pointed out, a few things of our grandpa for all to learn about. And now we have a gift for him, a little way to say, thank you, Grandpa, for all you do each and every day. We give this gift to you with love for the sample that you've shown, for you're the only grandpa some of us has ever known. Very, very sweet. Very nice.
Want to read this, what they got written in below this picture here. That's what they gave you.
Picture.
They present that picture to me when they gave.
Picture of the Savior.
And read what's below.
Well, there's a little chip of that come up there. From the bottom, that one.
And the inscription on the bottom of that picture says, Grandpa Criddle, thank you for your loving example, your Anderson family. That's a tribute to you, isn't it?
It is.
One that you cherish.
I do. I cherish.
Yes. Well, I think the record ought to show that over the years, my dear wife and I have known quite a few people from this area. And always, when we have inquired about you, they, with a smile on their face, has commented about what a great man he was. And we, like you, have been grateful for that Criddle heritage that we share.
As I sat the other night thinking about my life, I wondered what I'd be remembered for. what I'd accomplished. And as I thought about those things, I think my family is my greatest accomplishment. You take it as true that I labored in the stake in 3 different bishoprics, high council, and stake presidency. But it's a record among the record of my church activities. But with my death, my activities comes to a close. As I think of my family, and that's a record that's going to go on. Now you take it, Dale's had a number of go into the mission field. Melvin's had a number going to the mission field. And by the way, Melvin, one that lives in Kaysville, he and his wife entered the mission home on the 16th of June.
January.
Or January, 16th of January, going to Texas on a mission.
Now, they have a son that lives in Syracuse, don't they?
Yes,
In Syracuse,
I think they do. Isn't that where Steve?
I
Steve?
can't remember his
Steve?
first name, but
Steve and
Audrey.
Audrey?
yeah, Steve, he
His
lives,
wife's name is Audrey.
Yeah.
yeah, Audrey. That's
Yes.
that's Melvin's boy.
I've never met him, but I know Audrey well.
You know, well, that's Melvin's boy. And then his oldest boy filled a mission as he was in England. Michael, and
You comment, though, that your church assignments will have ended and have ended.
well, as
But-
far as I'm concerned, but it'll extend on through my family.
Yes, but through your family, but also it's important to know that the impact that you have had in these years upon other families will go on and be an eternal inheritance. That impact is there and will be there for eternity.
Yes, that's true. And, you know, sometimes I have people come and speak to me and make remarks that it almost brings tears to my eyes. I was down in the temple one day, and there's a fellow here living in our stake here that came up to me and says, "Brother Criddle, I want to tell you that your life has been an example to me." And you know, it kind of humbles a person.
Yes.
It's the fulfillment of my patriarchal blessing. Now, when I received my patriarchal blessing, the patriarch made this statement. I was in the bishopric at the time. He says, "You will yet be called to fill a position of great responsibility in this church. You'll sit in council with men in high and holy places." And I went into the high council after being in 3 different bishoprics, never bishop, but counselor to 3 of them. And then I went into the high council. I was in the high council for 2 years and became a counselor in the stake presidency. And was with him for about 5 years, and then was made the stake president. And I have sat with men in high and holy places. I've been in the temple where we've sat there with the general authorities and the authorities of the church, the stake presidencies, and the Salt Lake Temple. I think there's over 2,000 people they put up in that upper story. And I've been in the Logan Temple in those solemn assemblies, but I have one distinct privilege in my life that I don't think a stake president will ever have again. I was ordained or set apart as a missionary by Richard R. Lyman. He later came into the mission field and met with us in the mission field. So I had more contact with Richard R. Lyman than I had any of them up until that time. And by the way, when I came home, the first conference I attended, Richard R. Lyman was the visiting authority here, and of course I talked with him here, so I'd had 3 contacts with Richard R. Lyman. At 23 years of age, I went into the bishopric, and Stephen L. Richards ordained me a high priest, and I served in the bishopric here in the Downey Ward. Then I went out to, moved out to Cambridge. Offhand, I can't tell you just when it was, because I have records of it. And I went in as a counselor in the bishopric out in Cambridge Ward. And then the ward was reorganized, and I went into counselor in the 3rd bishopric. Well, when I was ordained or set apart as a bishopric in the, remember the bishopric in the Cambridge Ward, Melvin J. Ballard set me apart. And when the ward was reorganized, I went back in as a counselor. Heber J. Grant was in our stake, and he set me apart as a counselor and the 3rd member of the bishopric, 3rd time in the bishopric. Then I went into the High Council, and Stephen L. Richards again set me apart. I went into the stake presidency. Charles A. Callis set me apart. When I went into stake presidency, Henry D. Boyle and Marion G. Romney were the ones that set me apart. When we had a reunion, family reunion, this past summer, and I have a grandson. He lived in Seattle. Came down, and he wanted me to give him his father isn't active, and my grandson, he came to me and he says, "Grandfather, I've never had a father's blessing." He says, "Will you give me a father's blessing?" I told him yes, I would. And so we had our family reunion, and well, there was a large crowd there. What was it? Someone said there was 140 odd present at our family reunion. And so that was on a Saturday, and on Sunday he came here to our home, and I gave him a father's blessing. And his little boy came to me afterwards. He says, "Grandpa, could I see that room where the prophet slept?" I told him yes, he could see that room. Of course, President Benson has stayed here with me, I know, 3 times. And President Kimball, he never stayed with him. He came into our stake and had dinner with me. His wife came, but then he stayed with one of my counselors when he was in our stake. But he came back later and ordained my son here as the bishop of the Downey Ward, so he'd been in our home 2 different times. Harold B. Lee here was here a number of times and stayed with me. Joseph Fielding Smith stayed with me a number of times until they all slept in that room. And at one time I could say that practically all of the general authorities of the church had been in my home for 19 years. In those days there wasn't so many stakes, and we'd always have general authority, and they had conference every 3 months. Now they cut it down to 2, but then every 3 months, and you see, in that period of time, why, practically all of them would be here. And so most of them had been here, and of course I've had conferences with them down there, and met with different authorities in Salt Lake at different times, and so I've associated with men, as the blessing said, in high and holy places. And in that same blessing it says there will be many that will thank you for the what you have done, the influence you've had in their lives.
And you have.
And that you mentioned that, but
Yes.
I brought that to my mind.
Well, I think we should extend to you our feelings. The 4 of us are deeply grateful for that Criddle heritage. We value it very, very highly. We're grateful for it.
Well, it's something to be appreciative of. Now, I remember Delbert coming here. One time coming through here, I don't remember he stopped the time as he went through, but at any rate, this is a story that Delbert told. He'd been someplace, I don't know where, but he was getting a little low on change, and he went down here to want to get some gas. And he asked them if they'd take a check. We knew anyone around here. What his name was, he says, he's a Criddle. He says, are you related to the Criddles here? He says, yes. He says, well, I'll take your check. So, there's a name is not to be cherished.
I'll share a story with you. We were in Philadelphia. I was released from the Navy. We wanted to buy a car, my wife and I. We had travel money to come back on the train, but we thought if we bought a car, we could come home more cheaply and save some of that cost and have a car when we got home. We'd never owned a car up to that point. We'd been married 5 years. And I called the Clearfield State Bank and asked if we could borrow some money to buy that car. It was $1,100. And he said, yes, I'll wire the money to you and you just sign a note when you get home. And I was a young boy, but the reputation of the family was sufficient for a telephone call to wire money back to Philadelphia so that we could buy a car. When we got home, we went in, signed the note, and paid it off.
Yeah, the good name is something to be cherished.
Yes.
Uncle Fay tells the story, if I can get it about right, of Dick Gailey, Kaysville Barnes Bank. Had an occasion to talk to him. He says, if your son-in-law, William Criddle, there's no problem. You can have what you want.
Is that right?
Your son-in-law, William Criddle, you can have what you want.
So the Criddles down there, as well as in Downey, have left honorable names.
Something to be cherished. Well, this is the only one of my family that live around here. How's your finger?
Okay.
When did you operate on it? Yesterday?
Just this morning.
Just this morning.
Yeah.
What happened?
White growth on it. Cyst. You don't have to take my picture.
Well, we're grateful that you came dropping by to meet your cousins.
Well, usually it's family, so I just thought I'd stop in, so.
Well, this is family, all right.
Yeah.
We're family. We're family.
Yeah, I knew Delbert and Lawrence, most of those quite well. I
Did
remember
you?
Uncle Jim and Uncle Bill. I'm old enough I remember most of those.
He took me down last year ago, this last fall, to see Viola. We went
Did you?
down and visited with her for a day.
She commented on
She
that,
did.
how she appreciated it.
We appreciate very much. And
She'd probably come with us today if her husband was in better shape. But he don't get that far away anymore.
I know he was having problems when we were there that day.
Mhm.
You know, time to-
He's pretty good though for where he was a year ago.
Oh.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity of interviewing you, Brother Criddle. Grateful for that.
well, I don't know what more I could tell you, because a lot of those things that happened before my day.
You've given us the feeling of your father and his influence and what's happened with the family since he left there, and that's important. We'll have a little piece on him in the Syracuse history. We'd like to get a picture of him and your mother, if we may, some way. To have, I don't know whether that's possible.
Well,
I don't think we have one, do you?
I guess it would be possible. They never had them taken together, but they have in a family group sheet there together. Not a family group sheet, but in a family picture. Of course, they're not sitting together. One's on one side, one on the other, if I remember right. And they've been taken off and put together. You got that picture.
I got it. If they want to get a picture put on here, I could go get it and bring it over. It's a framed picture.
It's a framed picture.
You could take a picture of that with your Polaroid, couldn't you, and develop?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can go over and get it if you want to take
we
a picture of
appreciate
it.
it.
I'll go get it.
I guess we'll be enough here.
In case some of you are wondering what this video is all about, it's about this group that's primarily that are pictured here. And if there's any of you that don't know who this bunch are, I'll explain. Along the bottom on the left is my sister Jean, my little sister. Then Mother Alda, my father James A. Criddle, and my sister Carol, and my oldest sister Connie. And in the back is my younger brother Keith, and next to him is my youngest brother Clyde, and that bigger one kind of in the middle, that's my little brother Melvin, and then myself, Dale. I'm the narrator and the one that is compiling these pictures. A few years ago at one of our family reunions, I showed a collection of slides I had made of older pictures and of slides that I had taken after I got a 35mm camera, and showed them at these pictures at a family reunion. Some of you thought it would be nice to have pictures of these, but I haven't got around to making a copy. So I am in the process now of making copies of some of the pictures which I have. I know that they're not too good. This is a video of a picture. Some of them are going to be videos of pictures, and they're not too distinct. Some of them black and white are quite old, but I hope that you'll perhaps bring back a few memories as you look at them. This particular picture was taken at one of our family reunions down at a hot springs, I think in 90. This picture was taken at the same time and is a picture of Father, Mother Alda, and his children with their spouses. To name them, starting on the left is Keith and his wife Carol Lee, Randy and his wife Jean, Clyde and his wife was unable to come, Mother and Father, and Glenn and his wife Carol, Reed and his wife Connie, Melvin and his wife Sherry, and myself and my wife Kathleen. This presentation is more in particular in reference to my father, James A. Criddle. But of course all of us are involved in his life history. Being the oldest one in the family, I perhaps I have more pictures and remember him longer than any other member of the family. I've associated with him throughout my entire life, and he lived a total of 96 years. This is a picture which I have in my home of my father's parents, John Criddle and Sarah Ellen Bennett Criddle. This is the family of John Criddle and Sarah Ellen Bennett, and to which my father, James Criddle, was born, showing him, his father and mother, and brothers and sisters. For the benefit of those who do not know the members of my father's family, I will name them to you. In the back, starting at the left, is my Aunt Nettie. Then Uncle Lorne, Aunt Evie, and Uncle Johnny. I'm sure most all of you remember Uncle Johnny. Starting at the left, at the bottom, is John Criddle, and Aunt Arissa, Aunt Sadie, Aunt Vinnie, and of course Father sitting on the front, and then Sarah Ellen Bennett Criddle. This picture was probably taken when Father, I imagine, was 8 or 9 years old, and his father passed away in 1913 when Father was 13 years old, and after which time Father had the responsibility of doing most of the work on the farm because his older brothers and sisters were then married. While I'm taking pictures of pictures, I will show a few others of Father during his lifetime. This one, as all of you would know, his father with his first wife, my mother, Vesta Levon Salveson. They were married in December of 1923. They were the parents of 3 boys, myself, Dale, Melvin, and Max. After my mother passed away in 1936, Father married Bessie Jensen in June of 1937. This picture was not taken at the time of their marriage, but shows them as perhaps most of us remember them. They were the parents of 5 children: Connie, Jean, Carol, Keith, and Clyde. After Bessie passed away in October of 1962, Father married Alda Hanson Anderson in June of 1963. This picture was taken later in life, but shows them as perhaps most of us remember them. This is another picture of my Father James and my mother Vesta, and it is written on in the top. This was Father's picture originally, and written on in the top, married December the 5th, 1923. Probably most of you do not remember my mother's parents, George and Elizabeth Salveson. This picture was taken later in life, probably not long before they passed away at the age of 80. This picture might have been taken just previous to their 60th wedding anniversary, which was in December of 1951, and they passed away a few months following it in 1952. This is Father's family in approximately 1949 or 50. All of the children are there except Clyde, and Clyde wasn't born until 1952, so the family isn't quite complete yet. I think you can recognize all of them. Max, Melvin, and myself along the back. Jean, Father, Carol, Keith, Mother, and Connie. That scar on Melvin's face isn't a scar, it's a scratch that was in the picture of which I'm taking a picture of. So that you might know my mother's family better, this portrays those who were surviving in approximately 1960. On the back row, my mother's older brother, Leroy Salveson, and Orville Salveson, Herman, and my Uncle Conrad, who was blind. He was the youngest in the family. Then starting again on the right in front was Aunt Verda, who was next to my mother in age, then Aunt Mabel and Aunt Sybil. In front is my cousin Orba, who was the only daughter of my Aunt Hilma, who died in the 30s, not too long after my own mother died. These pictures are now being taken from slides being shown by my projector. They aren't the best, but they're all that I have. You can turn off the sound if you don't like it. My voice is a little raspy. I don't have a monitor to a script to follow, so I'll be making some mistakes. So you just turn off the sound if you don't want to read it and listen to it. I suggest that you refer to Dad's personal history in reference to some of the pictures and some of the events. I don't have the original on many of these pictures because Connie now has Dad's pictures and is making a record of them. So for more complete pictures, Connie has them, but I'm just taking some of the main ones that I have. This in 1894, I'm quoting from Dad's history. Father's parents, John and Sarah, sought to better their lot by moving to Idaho. They exercised their homestead rights on 160 acres of ground about a half mile northeast of Downey, where the sage grew higher than one can reach. Logs were brought from the canyon and a one-room log cabin was built. The family came in the spring of 1895 to occupy the home, which had a dirt roof and for a time a dirt floor. This one room was the home of 8 people being the kitchen, bedroom, and living room for the next 2 years. In the spring and summer of 1897, John Criddle built a frame house that consisted of one large room with a lean on the east, which was used as the bedroom and pantry. If you look at this picture, it's the right-hand portion of the house, just past the door that you see there. In 1905, rooms were added on the north of the home, the addition consisting of 2 bedrooms, a large closet, and a parlor into which they only went on special occasions, as it was a special room. Father's brother, John, raised his family in this home, and now Clark Criddle, Reed's son, lives in this home. Of my father's family, there were 8 children and their parents living in this small home. This is a hand plow, somewhat like was used to plow the ground when my father was young. Quoting again from his journal, in memory I am in the summer. I have milked a number of cows before the sun comes up, separated the milk, calves and pigs fed, horses grained, and after a hearty breakfast, ready to go to the field to follow a hand plow. It was not hard to lay on the floor and go to sleep during the noon hour while the horses ate and rested. Then go to the field again for 4 or 5 hours, and chores to do again at night, having plowed about 2½ acres. In those days I never had any trouble sleeping the night through, which was always too sharp. This is the type of a harness that was used to hook onto the hand plow to pull it, somewhat like Father might have used. The grain was cut with a heading machine which cut the heads off, and it was elevated into a wagon, put in stacks, after which a threshing machine came and threshed the grain. The grain had to be thrown in by men with pitchforks into the header, which was powered by the tractor unit on the front of the implement that is shown here. This is another picture of a threshing machine that I was happened to see on one of the trips we went on. It was powered by a coal-burning steam engine. The individual standing beside of the steam engine are my daughter Renee and son Carl. The grain was straw with the heads of grain and straw were thrown into the back of the header there, which has a folded up tight platform that run through the threshing machine, and then the pipe that's along the top is where the straw was blown out. This was called a binder. It was another of the implements that was used to cut the grain and tie it into bundles, which had to be then hauled into the threshing machine. I remember Father cutting the grain this way one year. Father's mother, Sarah Ellen Bennett Criddle, is on the right rear of this picture. The other individuals, I think, were her brother and sisters, but I do not know their names. This is how Father looked when he went into the mission field in 1919. After returning from the mission field, my father courted Vesta Salveson, who became his wife and my mother. This is a picture of the Salveson Ranch, which is located about 3½ miles southeast of Downey. This shows the Salveson farm as it is today. I was born in a small bedroom on the south, which is the white part of the building home, which you can see here. After their marriage in December of 1923, they moved into the home shown here, which is located west of Cambridge and west of Uncle Alvin Hancock's farm, about a quarter of a mile west of it. The home no longer exists there. This is the home they were living in when I was born. The following pictures are of my mother, and in the dress, which was typical of that time. This is my great-grandmother, Ancini Salveson. On her lap, she was holding my Aunt Mabel. On the left is my Aunt Berta, and the one on the right was my mother, Vesta. I still remember seeing my great-grandmother, and I have in my possession a chair which was one of her belongings. Here shown again is the wedding picture of my father and mother. My mother, Vesta, on the left, and her sister, Aunt Verda, on the right. In case you haven't guessed, that's me, that good-looking little kid in the front. And then I've got a baby brother up there, Melvin, shown with my parents. Dad's first car, on here with my parents and Melvin and I. Melvin and I, Mom and Dad, with the farm dog and Aunt Mabel in the background. This picture is taken at the south entrance of our home on the farm. This entrance went into the living room. Cute little me on the right. Myself and Melvin with the baby buggy. And then that nice young baby at the bottom left is Melvin. This is Max, picture taken in January 1935, a little more than a year before our mother Vesta passed away. Couple of good-looking kids, don't you think? Melvin and I. This is Grandpa Salveson holding Max, myself on the left, and Melvin on the right. In case you haven't guessed, this is my Uncle Herman. For those that know him, he was always quite a tease. I think he has his arm around my Uncle Conrad, Aunt Verda sitting down, and that's me back there with my hands around my face for some reason. This shows Father sitting on his father's lap with his mother standing in the background. My mother's parents, George and Elizabeth Salveson. My mother's parents again on the occasion of their 60th wedding anniversary. They both passed away a few months later, being over 80 years of age. My mother's brothers and sisters in 1977 Starting on the left is my Aunt Verda, just younger than my mother. Aunt Mabel, Uncle Arvel, Uncle Herman, Aunt Sybil, and Uncle Conrad. Uncle Conrad was born blind. The three older ones of the family that passed away, my Aunt Helma, the oldest, Uncle Roy, and then my mother. There were also 2 children that died in infancy. Guess who? I'm not going to name all of them for you, but this was the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade class in the Cambridge school. One of them that you might recognize on the front, holding the number 280, is myself. Immediately behind me in the back, someone that all of you should recognize, was my teacher in the 4th grade, Bessie Jensen. As all of you know, she had an important role to play in the life of our family a few years later. Here it is a few years later, and there's Bessie Jensen again. This is taken in January of 1937. My father invited her up for New Year's Day dinner and to meet with us boys and get better acquainted. My father with Melvin and I on the same occasion. This is taken on the west side, the entrance going into our home on the farm, the east side up at Cambridge. Father and Bessie, and as you know, our dog Mutt had to get in the picture also. As you can tell, these pictures aren't in very good order. When I took them with my pictures of that with my 35mm camera, I grouped the whole bunch on a page and took the whole page together. Now I'm trying to separate them out and take the one picture at a time. This, of course, is following my father's marriage to my stepmother, or mother, as we all called her, Bessie, and showing myself and Max and Melvin, and also the cat's tail shown against the dress. The family's grown a little bit by now. You can see a couple of girls are added. The black cow on the left was Dad's pet cow. Blackie, she had a crush on Dad. She'd come from the far ways. She could hear him call. She didn't even want Mother to be close by when he was milking. She was quite jealous. She had kind of a sad end, dying of bloat. The rubber-tired wagon in the background on the right is what we called a Hoover wagon. We put different boxes on it to haul hay or grain or whatever the need might be. Here we are, ready for church with our little sister, Connie. Another picture of the same group. We were quite proud of our little sister, Connie. We hadn't had a sister. The years go by. There are now 3 sisters, but I'm missing from the group because this was taken after I went into the service during World War II. And it's after they moved to the home in Downey, probably in the fall of 1944. Here the girls are with their little dolls. Doll buggy. Looks like a cradle instead of a buggy. This shows Bessie's mother, Sylvia Jensen, in front of the Hotel Lemoyne in Burley, Idaho. They managed this hotel. This shows Leslie's father, Junius Jensen, with the grandchildren in front of the Hotel Lemoyne. Here I am, home on furlough, after receiving my basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Following this furlough in October of 1944, I again went east and eventually went overseas during World War II. Looks like this must be Gene in front of our house up to the farm before they moved to town. Looks like Connie in the picture taken up to the farm. Still home on furlough. I don't know why they wanted to take so many pictures while I was home. Maybe they thought I wouldn't get back again or something. More of the same. Finally got Mom in the picture and someone else held the camera. Looks like they're all ready for church. Three cute little girls, I think. Do you remember them when they were this young? Looks like they used rags instead of curlers to put up their hair in those days. Looks like Mom in a pioneer dress for some special occasion. Showing off the cute little gals over there with their parents on the right. Looks like the family's all ready for church again. Looks like two different Sundays though. The home in winter, before the wind blew the big pine tree down on the house. Harvesting the grain in 1941. That's the year Dad bought this collar tractor. It's an International TD9. I think he paid a little over $3,000 for it. Traded in 12, 14 head of horses for it. Also on the combine, I think it's Robert Burnside is raising the platform up and down, and Melvin Stone's is bagging the grain. On the rear is a bagger for the straw that comes out the end of the machine, and it was dumped in piles which we hauled to feed the horses in the wintertime. Another picture taken at the same time as the previous one. In 1944, Father purchased a Massey Harris self-propelled combine. I think he paid $2,800 for it, about a 12-foot cut. This was one of the best wheat crops that he raised, averaging around 45 bushel for the acre. Family came up to the farm to take a lunch break. Eat lunch with Dad while he was plowing at the farm. Connie could get lost in the wheat, it was so tall. Noticed the wide-brimmed hat which Father usually wore because he sunburned very easily. Most of you remember Dad's horse Pippin. He was a gaited American saddler. Had a pace that was very nice and gentle, and nice gentle lope. He's holding Keith, who was 5 months old at the time. I now have a 35 millimeter camera which I can take colored slides, so the pictures from now on after this date will be in color, most of them. This shows father with the Massey Harris self-propelled combine. This picture was taken in the summer of 1952. My wife Kathleen and James, approximately a little over 1 year old. Father standing in one of the best wheat crops I ever raised. This is following when he sold the farm to me, and in the background you can see that we now have a John Deere hillside combine which levels on the side hills. How many of them do you recognize? This is the Portneuf State Presidency. That was the state president for 19 and a half years. On his right is Henry Cammick. On his left is Willis L. Brim, who was my bishop when I was growing up. In the back on the left is LaRue Godfrey, who taught many of you in school. Next is Clyde Burrup, who also taught many of you in school and who was the principal of the school for a long time. And on the right is Walter Messenger. This year I think Walter Messenger is will be 108 years old and is still alive, but in quite feeble health. Father and mother again. This is a picture of a picture of a picture. All of Father's family, except Clyde, that came along just a few years later. This picture was taken in 1950 or 51, the year I got married. The suit and tie that I'm wearing, I still have in my possession. January 1950, I brought my bride-to-be up to meet my folks. This is a 1949 Chev that cost me $1,800 for the first car. The pickup in the background is Melvin's first car, which was a Dodge pickup. Mom and Dad at the same time. Melvin and his bride-to-be, Sherry Christiansen. Max is peeking out the window. Good-looking young men, don't you think? The pine tree in the background grew much larger, and a few years ago it also was blown down by a wind. I had to get a picture of everyone. Keith's kind of a cute little kid in those days, wasn't he? Look at that big smile that Gene's got. June the 9th, 1950, Mesa Temple. I really felt wonderful to have such a beautiful bride. Of course, my parents on the left, and Kathleen, my wife's parents, in the back. Claudius Bowman and Jenny Bowman. Dad was real pleased to have me get married. He thought I was getting to be an old bachelor, and he thought maybe I'd never make it, but my bride was worth waiting for. Melvin and Sherry were wed in the Logan Temple on June the 6th, 1950. Our parents on the left, and of course Sherry's parents, Orion and Ruth Christiansen, on the right. In the fall of 1950, Father and Mother went back east to get a new Dodge car. and then extended their trip back to some of the church historic places. This picture is taken of Father overlooking Niagara Falls. The Hill Cumorah, which he visited. The Sacred Grove. The Joseph Smith farm home. This is where the prophet Joseph Smith received a visitation from the angel Moroni, and father and mother were permitted to spend the night in this home. Mount Vernon, the home of George Washington, and father and mother are standing in the doorway in the center. Father and mother at Carthage Jail, where the prophet Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith were martyred by a mob. These are members of Mother Bessie's Jensen's family. The couple on the right are Junius and Sylvia Jensen, her parents. The next couple on the front is Robert Burnside and mother's sister Anna. Of course, behind is Melvin and mother and father. Then on the left, far left, is her brother Junius. This is the occasion when they went to the Idaho Falls Temple to be sealed. In front of Junius is his wife, and behind her and in front of her are their two children. Max on home on furlough from the Navy. In the background is one of the dorms of Wymount Village. My wife and I had an apartment here going to school during the year of 1951-52. This was at Brigham Young University, in case any of you do not know. Graduation day, June 1952. Of course, that's my cute little boy James, father with Carol and Jean. This was a familiar sight at Thanksgiving time. Jean hiding in the background. I don't think Mother wanted her picture taken. Connie was hiding. Another familiar scene in the kitchen. Looks like Keith was even trying to help. Guess who? Clyde, 1952. Another familiar sight in the kitchen. I'm sure all of you remember the wonderful dinners we had in the dining room on special occasions. The other end of the table with the rest of the food. All of the table with everyone seated around it. Please notice the bay windows on the right that were changed when Father remodeled. Also notice the wallpaper in the background on the left. Oh, and the glass slide chandeliers over the table, they were changed also. I don't know how come Max got a special picture all by himself. Note the artwork on the wall at the back on the right. This was a Jensen family dinner held in Burley. Some of you might remember it. Pictures are too small to identify only a very few. One frosty morning, the way the home the pine tree used to be and the way probably most of you remember it. Disaster in the form of a very severe windstorm struck the big pine tree. Also noticed the pipe railing around the yard, which probably some of us have forgotten. Poor pine tree. Also other trees were damaged. Please note the north side of the home, the way we used to remember it. The view from the west with my wife and James and Paul standing with her. This would have been in the summer of 1953, I think. The same wind demolished the barn, also blew the grain bin, which was on the foundation in the foreground, and blew it over in front of the house at the right rear. You can see the galvanized tin grain bin there. Another view of the damage. Note that the grain bin has been pushed off of its foundation. We were able to replace it back on its foundation again. Also note the chicken coops on the right that we used to have. Another tree that was uprooted. This is the home that is south of my Aunt Mabel's home. More damage. This is the red brick home. It's on the corner just east of my parents' house. View from the top of Oxford Peak. On this particular occasion, Father made the climb to the top of the mountain. Positive proof that Father was there. Standing back on the left, Uncle Leroy Salvesen, my mother's brother, in the middle, in the back, and I think it's Vernon Hardwickson on the right. Either Carol or Connie or both made the climb also. This shows the full group that made the climb. John Christiansen took the horse up. Father is in about the middle front with one of the girls in front of him. Another family dinner. I don't know what the special occasion is. Connie's got a corsage, it looks like, but it looks like she's kind of deep in thought. Keith and Jean, picture's slightly out of focus. I wonder what the special occasion was and who Connie is thinking about. Looks like they're tired but happy that it's all over with. I note them holding hands here. Everyone pitching in to clean up. Dad and his coveralls taking a little rest. This was kind of a familiar sight for those that remember it. Carol and Jean are growing up. This was taken in my home before it was remodeled. This was the east end of the living room. I wonder what Connie's doing down there. I think she's trying to hide. Note on the right the way our kitchen and kitchen table and chairs used to be before we remodeled. Looks like Connie's got her arms full. Max's marriage to Carolyn. The wedding of Max and Carolyn Reed. Her parents were on the right. Another picture of the wedding. Carolyn's sister on the right. And yours truly on the left. Notice the bow tie. I used to wear bow ties quite often. Newlyweds in front of the fireplace. Perhaps you remember the mugs that were on the top of the fireplace mantle, which I gave the folks sent home when I was in the mission field for the members of the family. We thought we ought to have an old-time Chevrolet, so we had Max pull his bride around town in the wagon. Of course, Keith had to get in the act here and have a good time. A birthday party for Dad with his brothers and sisters. Aunt Arissa Salveson on the right, Aunt Vinnie Barnes, and Aunt Nettie Hancock, and on the left, Aunt Evie Clay. Father's two surviving brothers on the left, Uncle Johnny and Uncle Lorne, and another picture of Aunt Abby Clegg and Lynetta Hancock. The picture of Uncle Johnny is typical of his happy expression. Father's brother-in-laws, Uncle Eli Barnes on the right, Alvin Hancock in the center, and Roy Salveson on the left. Can you name them now? It doesn't seem possible that all of them have passed away now, Father being the last one to go. Look them over good, so you'll know who they are when you meet them in the next life. Can you match them up with their spouses? Starting on the back left, Uncle Eli Barnes, Uncle Roy Salveson, Mother, Uncle Johnny, his wife Aunt Chloe, Uncle Alvin Hancock, Aunt Nettie, starting on the front row on the left, Aunt Arissa Salveson, Uncle Lorne, and his wife, actually his second wife, Maxine, Aunt Evie Clegg, and Aunt Vinnie sitting next to Father. Can you remember who they are now and name all of them? Try again. Can you name them? Actually, it's Uncle Lorne's wife, Maxine, who is sitting next to Father. Looks like Dad is relaxing with the grandchildren. On the front is James, and Clyde, Keith, Yvonne, Mark, and Paul. Looks like Father has his lap and arms full. First Keith on the left, and back of him is Paul, Clyde, Mark, James, and Melvin's children, Julie and Carolyn, and then Michael, Melvin's boy, in front. The sun must be setting from the color of this picture. On the filter, I guess. Dad and his boys. Dad and the family. I don't know why Melvin is looking so sad. Mom and the girls. Beautiful, aren't they? Another wedding. Connie and Reed Gardner. Part of Connie and Reed's wedding party at the Idaho Falls Temple. Connie's parents and grandparents on the right, and Reed's parents and grandparents on the left. Father and Mother's 25th wedding anniversary. She passed away the following October 1962. Another wedding anniversary picture. Here they are again. And again. Dad and Alda married June 14th, 1963 in the Logan Temple. Dad and Alda and the family at home in 1964. Here we are again, in case you didn't get a good look at the last picture. Here they are again. Maybe they're a little happier this time. Such a lovey-dovey pair. I wonder who he's looking at. He's looking at us now. Who was Mother looking at? Looking at us. Who's Jean looking at? Looking at us. Does he look like a future doctor? Must be somebody on that side that everybody keeps looking at. Whether with or without his glasses. Good looking kid, don't you think? Cute curly got in his hair there. Hello there. Look who's graduating. Can't seem to get a good picture of him. Looks like my pictures were all underexposed. I think you can tell who it is though. Proud father and son. I think he's got his hand in Dad's pocket. I wonder what Keith's grinning about. How come I got so many pictures with Keith in them? The Criddle Anderson family reunion held at the old Downey High School. I'm not going to try to name them all. Dad and Alda and their offspring I'm not going to try to name the ones on the front, on the back, excuse me, the back, but I will name the ones on the front, eldest children, in case you don't remember them. Next to her is Eugene, Vern, Lyle, Betty, Norma, and Carolyn. Here they are again. Perhaps it's Vern standing next to Alda and Eugene next. In the background is the old Downey High School. Father helped construct this when he came back from his mission field. And I graduated, so did Melvin and Max from the high school. And then later it became the junior high, and many of you attended the junior high school here. Yep. Same occasion. Dad and his offspring. Here we are again. Some of you remember the rock wall in the back of us. That was constructed following the Depression by the WPA. And also in the background is our farm next to the mountains on the east side. Looks like they've been enjoying the occasion. Here all of us are again. If you couldn't find yourself the first time, maybe you can now. Looks like another wedding. Jean and Randall in the Salt Lake Temple. Here they are again, Jean and Randall Bensley and their parents. We used to really enjoy snowmobiling when we could afford to buy snowmobiles. This is Keith and Carol Lee on top of the Brush Creek Yago Divide. These snowmobiles cost about 400 bushels a week. Now they cost around 2,000 to 3,000 bushels a week. Here are the snowmobilers again. Father enjoyed snowmobiling also. This picture is also on the Brush Creek Yago Divide. When I was a young boy, we used to go up over this divide and back in Yago to cut firewood for our wood stove, which furnished the heat for our home when I was young. Also to do all the cooking. You didn't have a chainsaw then either. All the wood was cut with an axe, loaded on a wagon, an iron-wheeled wagon going down this slope here to the left. The rear wheels of the wagon would be chained, tied together over the top of the load, so they would drag and not try to push too fast, to push the horses too fast. At home, the wood was, most of it was cut with a saw, a hand saw, sometimes a power saw powered by an old automobile engine. Keith and Carol Lee at the home of Jean and Randy, where the family met for one of our family get-togethers. Here the girls are relaxing at the same occasion. Looks like Carol's been putting on a little weight. Looks like Sherry got left alone. Hello, Carolyn. Hi, Jean. Or as we used to say, health. I wonder what Julie's thinking about. Connie and Marilyn, but I don't know whose baby. This is the way we harvest our crop. Marks on the combine. Our Criddle Mountain up the left. Another picture of the combine and truck. We haul our 300 bushel of grain on the truck. This shows how the separator of the combine levels on the side hill. Note that the unloading spot is almost down to touch the grain. Mom and Dad leaving our home. Relaxing on the couch. Another visit to my home. The 50th birthday party for Melvin down in Kaysville. The wedding of Max's boy Dwayne in the Salt Lake Temple. How many of the group can you recognize? Does this picture bring back memories? Relaxing in my home, 1979. Dad liked to go with me deer hunting, but he didn't shoot this one. I think all of you remember Uncle Johnny and his sense of humor. He lived to be 97 years old. Previous to his death, when we'd ask him how he was, he'd usually answer, "Well, the forked end is still down." You remember when we got Father a riding lawnmower for his 80th birthday? Father, Mother, and the two surviving members of Father's family at the time, Uncle Johnny and Aunt Benny Barnes. Are you ready for a sermon? Father and Mother and their posterity, shown on the occasion of Father's 80th birthday open house, held in the Downey Church, shown in the background. Father's children, at the occasion of his 80th birthday open house, with Max missing. Here we are again with our parents. Mom and Dad always liked to go on trips with the family. Here shows them as when they went on a trip with Randy and Jean down to Lake Powell. I don't know whether you can read it or not, but this is a sign telling about Rainbow Bridge. I don't know whether Dad's looking up the bridge or what. Here they are looking at the sign with Rainbow Bridge in the background. Here they are in 1981, just coming from the church. In 1981 again, this is the Senior Citizen Center. I don't know just what Dad looks so sad about, or sober. I think it was in the fall of 1983 we took them on a trip with us to the Northwest. We visited Keith and then went on the ferry over to Vancouver Island, and here we are in Bouchard Gardens. Some of you have been there. Very beautiful place to go. This was in October. Here we are again in Bouchard Gardens. We went on a ferry back across to Canada to Vancouver, and then we went through the Canadian Rockies over to Calgary and then down through Cardston and back home. Very enjoyable, beautiful trip. The following year, 1984, we went back up to Cardston and then crossed over to Winnipeg and then back down into Fargo, North Dakota. Now this is taken on the capital grounds at Regina in Canada. (1984). Looks like God just can't keep a pine tree. Underneath that tree is the shed where he kept the lawnmower. He had to get a new steel shed. The lawnmower had to have some repairs on it, but other than that, the major loss was the pine tree. And the cake tells the story on this slide. This was made by my wife, Kathleen, on the occasion of his 86th birthday. The same occasion, just another picture. Here he is again. If we take enough of these pictures, maybe we'll get a good one. Still another picture of the same occasion. The wheat weaving on the lampshade in the background was made by my son James's wife Kathy. The family dinner held at my home on the occasion of Father's 86th birthday. This shows the other side of the table on the same occasion, showing those present. Another view of the same occasion. I think you can know all those that were present. If you don't know, ask your parents or someone that was there. Looks like we had a pretty good sized table full. A close-up of these two characters, James and Laura, and my Renee's husband Darren. As you can see, my wife's back there in the seat where she usually is whenever we have a family gathering. Now a few close-up shots of Father's children and their spouses that were present at the dinner. Randy couldn't come, so Jean brought her daughter Brenda. last picture of the guest of honor. Too bad it wasn't a little sharper, it's a little bit out of focus. Casual shot of Dad watching some of my grandchildren and children playing basketball at the back of my garage, in case you don't recognize the location. This was at our family reunion in 1986. Hope you won't mind that I decided to include a couple of pictures of my wife and I, so you won't forget how we used to look. The date shown there was the date this was filmed, and not the date of the original picture. This is probably about around 1990, I think. We served as officiators in the Logan Temple from April of 1992 until December of 1995, almost 4 years. We really enjoyed this experience, even though we had to get up between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning to go down and be ready to act as officiators early in the morning. I have in my possession a reproduction of the Sears Roebuck and Company catalog for the year 1894, the year that my grandfather John Criddle moved up to Idaho. I thought I would show you a few items in this so you'd know how they compare in price with our present times. These were very useful catalogs because after the current year was passed, they were put in the outhouses for toilet paper. Here are gold-plated watches ranging in price from $2.75 to $3.90. 14-karat gold-filled cases ranging in price from $10.95 to $12.45. Notice how fancy the cases are engraved. $14-karat solid gold watches ranging in price from $43.75 up to around $65, depending whether it's a 7-jewel movement or a 17-jewel movement. Diamond earrings ranging in price from $10.35 for 1/4 carat to $98.50 for 1.5 carat earrings. Solid gold watch chains for men's watches ranging in prices from $20 to approximately $45. Singer sewing machines, such as Mother had up to the farm where we didn't have electricity, $13 to $15, depending on the number of drawers in the cabinet. Bicycles, $35 to $43. Baby buggies, $7 to $9. And they're really fancy. A 2-seat buggy with a top, such as the ones on the left, like the one we had up to the farm. I remember riding in a buggy such as this, $69 to $89. Fancy saddles, $14 to $20. Notice in the bottom right is the lady's side saddle. On the left, a foot-pedaled organ, very fancy, $48. On the right, a full-size upright piano, $155. A Colt revolver on the left, $10. A Smith & Wesson revolver on the upper right, from $10 to $14 depending on the caliber. Winchester rifles from $10 to $15 depending on the caliber.